good morning or good evening or wherever you're joining us. My name is Naomi Krautzig. I am part of the training and mentoring tasking of the ECOP program. For those of you that are just now becoming familiar with ECOP, it stands for Early Career Ocean Professionals Program. And in this program, our task team has started to create several series of webinars in order to reach out to a broader audience and provide the opportunities to get to know some very, very new and quite efficient networks, as well as new platforms that early career scientists can use. Today, we have a special webinar because it's not as the previous ones. So I'm not allowed to share yet why it's special, but you will see. So we have one specific case study today, the International Platform for Ocean Sustainability, IPOS, as well as BioAgora. But I won't give you any introduction today. Without further ado, I will give the platform to Sašo, our moderator for this webinar. So please enjoy. Please yours.
Thank you, Naomi. And hello, everyone. Good morning or evening, wherever you are. So thanks so much for joining us, or if you're listening to this after the recording. So as Naomi mentioned, we are here to organize a webinar where we present two different platforms for knowledge policy society interfaces on marine and biodiversity issues. And then to have a discussion with all of you in terms of how can these kinds of platforms better meaningfully engage ECOPs in their work. So the way that we've structured this webinar is that we'll have a first presentation of Luca BECQUET on International Platform of Ocean Sustainability, which is a newly emerging platform for producing actionable knowledge for ocean sustainability issues on a global scale. He will talk to us about how this is being formulated. Then we'll also hear from Olusola, who is an ECOP helping with the knowledge development team within IPOS to see how ECOPs have already been involved in this process. And then we'll move to Ute Jakob, who will talk to us about the BioAgora, the Science Service for Biodiversity, and Eclipse, which are existing platforms that work in Europe in a similar way in terms of producing demand-driven actionable knowledge. And then after those introductory presentations, I will divide you into groups to then have some time to discuss with us about how to best engage, what barriers do you face, what could be put in place to foster better engagement with you going forward, with the hope that if there is a particular issues that emerge, very kind of common issues across different ECOPs, that we can organize potentially follow-up webinars or exchanges in the coming weeks or months, and to also draft a white paper on the ECOP engagement in international knowledge policy society interfaces, to be hopefully presented at the UN Ocean Conference in Nice in June. And then, of course, yes, use the chat if you have any questions. We will have some time for questions and answers, although not a massive amount. So if it's possible, we'll try to respond to your questions directly in the chat, but do feel free to use it. There's just one point for the people who have joined that we wanted to check, because there was a little bit of a confusion this morning about the timing of the webinar, because the timing in the invitation and the timing in the Zoom registration were an hour different. So now we're following the Zoom registration one. But in case you had issues or you've already joined before, if you can let us know, that'd be great, so that we can make sure that we can avoid similar issues in the future. But then, without further ado, we'll pass to Luca to talk to us about how IPOS is coming along.
Thank you very much, Sašo. So I will share my screen to show you a few slides regarding this new platform that we are trying to co-developed, which is called the International Platform for Ocean Sustainability. Just to do a few information before I start. I will present a bit on the history and vision of the IPOS, then focus for a few minutes on the way early career ocean professionals and practitioners have been involved at the early stages of the work on IPOS. And then I will give the floor to Olusola, who is here with me today, to talk a bit about the Knowledge Community Development Team, which is a new governance mechanism that we've been working on for this new platform. And then the first disclaimer that I want to say to you before I start really deep diving into IPOS. As you can see on the screen, we are now IPOS does not exist per se today. We are still on the launching phase of the IPOS, and as you can see, we are calling ourselves now the Towards IPOS initiative. All of this to tell you that what I will introduce to you is not the final version of the IPOS, that IPOS will continue to be a living ecosystem, and that we are very happy to co-develop this with you, especially on the core topic of today's discussion, to make sure that we can engage as equitably, as inclusively possible with the early career ocean professionals from all over the world. So yeah, maybe a few words about the history of the IPOS, which was the concept of the IPOS was first introduced to the international community in February 2022 in the context of the One Ocean Summit, which helped us develop links with the scientific community, which supported officially the project, this idea, this concept during the last UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon. And this really started the core work on the concept of the IPOS, partly thanks to the support of the European Commission, which facilitated feasibility study to try and identify what already exists at this interface between knowledge and decision for the ocean, and also try to identify the gaps of this existing interface, and how IPOS could complement existing initiatives and could fill this gap. These feasibility studies, they helped us create a first version of the IPOS, which we tested last year between June and December, internationally with a lot of different stakeholders, including early career ocean networks. For instance, we worked with the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, with the Western Indian Ocean Early Career Scientist Network, with a youth group in Europe as well, to make sure that we can test and refine this first proposition that we are currently trying to implement in this launch phase, so that we can officially launch the IPOS at the UN Ocean Conference in Nice this year. To tell you a bit about what the IPOS is, basically our key objective is to act at this interface between knowledge and decision making in a way that focuses on strengthening the capacity of states to implement and accelerate the actual implementation of their global ocean commitments, such as the SDG, especially SDG 14, the Global Biodiversity Framework, and other international objectives. How does it work? Basically, the IPOS wants to be a new platform, a new demand-driven platform that helps states responding to key questions that they have identified by gathering all the knowledge systems and all the knowledge and right holders together, making sure that you can facilitate the interaction between those different knowledge systems and the decision makers, to facilitate the production of collective policy options that will respond to some specific questions from the states. And the consultation process that we've undertaken last year helped us design 3 services for the IPOS, which basically you can see on the screen. The first one is called Action Request. It's really the idea of starting from a question, a need for knowledge that will be shared by a state or a group of states, and then the IPOS would be in charge of creating an ad hoc working group gathering local and international experts from multiple disciplines, including academic sector, including the civil society, the private sector, representative of local communities, indigenous people, youth groups as well, to co-produce collectively options and recommendations to respond to those questions. I will jump directly to the third service, which is basically a way to balance this first idea. As I mentioned, the objective of IPOS is really to work as a interface, as a middle person between the knowledge holders, the different knowledge systems, and the decision maker. But not only in one direction, not only in one way, as we do with the Ocean Action Request, but the Ocean Catalyst is also a way for us to offer the opportunity to representatives of the academic sector, of the civil society, of any knowledge system, to use IPOS as a way to carry their priority, to push for the collective work with the states on those specific priorities, those urgent priorities that they've identified on the ground. And the last service, which is called the Ocean Rapid Response, is the idea of trying to find a way to be able to provide some urgent responses to states by leveraging new tools of communication, and especially artificial intelligence, for synthesizing and gathering and weaving and making accessible all the knowledge that is currently available in a way that is, of course, aligned with the IPOS values of equity, inclusivity, being demand-driven, and being action-oriented. Just very quickly, because I don't want to take too much time, and I'm very happy to answer any question you might have after this, to tell you that we are currently testing those 3 services with 3 different projects. So one in France, one in the Seychelles, and one in Costa Rica. Very happy to answer to any question you have on those specific projects. I think I skipped. Okay. And now I will focus on basically the way we've been working with youth and early career ocean professionals in the last years, actually, to collectively design this IPOS, and especially making sure that it's a value proposition, so the mission and the vision that we have for the IPOS is aligned with the need of every stakeholder, including youth and early career ocean professionals, that the way it will work will offer opportunities to early career ocean professionals and youth representatives to participate actively, not only in the projects, but also in the governance of the IPOS, and also, of course, making sure that the way IPOS will produce its deliverable will be facilitating the participation of youth from all over the world. So basically, we started this work with early career ocean professional by events and workshops, which were dedicating part of them to identifying strategies and methodologies to work with early career ocean professionals. And we did that especially last year during the UN Ocean Decade Conference that took place in Barcelona. That was dedicated to working with the Global South, and especially one section of it was dedicated to working with ECOPs. Sorry, but we've also done a lot of interactions with youth representatives and early career ocean professionals during this consultation process to make sure that we were able to test the value proposition of IPOS with different representatives of the youth community and early career ocean communities. So whether it was through in-person workshops, through the online survey, or online webinars with specific organizations that you can see on the screen, it was very important for us to work with the community of early career ocean professionals. And right now we are preparing the launch of the IPOS and making sure that we continue to have those interactions with the representatives of the community. And we're very happy to be with you today. And to focus maybe a bit more on the content of the discussion, the original idea that we had for working with early career ocean professionals was to create a youth coalition in support of the IPOS. But actually, what came up from the discussion that we had with different representatives of the early career ocean professional community was that it did not correspond really to what was expecting from your side, and that rather than having a separate siloed youth coalition within IPOS, it was much more accurate to shift the narrative and actively involve and valorize and consider youth and early career Russian professionals in every IPOS activities. And it's what we have been doing in the past few years, actively involving, especially in the pilot projects, for instance, and in the co-design of the IPOS youth representatives. And right now, the objective, just before I hand over the mic to Sola to talk about the KCDT, is really to operationalize this strategy together. As Sašo mentioned, one of our objectives is to prepare a white paper to be presented hopefully at UNOC that will basically set up the tone and the strategy of IPOS to respond to the needs of early career Russian professionals to actively be involved in this science policy interface and this knowledge policy interface. So very happy to discuss that with you, and I will now give the floor to Sola to talk about the knowledge community development team.
I think Olusola has some connection issues. So,
okay.
Maybe you just
maybe on. I can. Yeah, I can. And Sola, feel free to complete if you have any other aspects that you want to mention. So yeah, I wanted to focus on one specific aspect of this Towards IPOS work, which is, as I mentioned earlier, the Knowledge Committee Development Team, the KCDT as we call it, which was created really as an innovative and inclusive governance mechanism for the Towards IPOS to really provide key advice and guidance for some very central topic for the future of IPOS, especially its governance, focusing on how we will offer opportunities to every knowledge systems to be actively included within the IPOS governance, but also to help us design this stakeholder networking strategy and engagement strategy as part of what we call the knowledge network within this IPOS, the future IPOS. And something that was very important for us was to make this new tool, this new governance mechanism, as inclusive and diverse as possible. And we decided to focus on regional representation, and we decided to have only one representative from the 22 sub-regions that are defined by the United States Statistic Division, also focusing on gender equity, making sure that we can have like this criteria as a key criteria for the Knowledge Committee Development Team. As of now, we have 16 representatives. 8 of them are women and 8 of them are men. Something that was very important for us is also the repartition between the academic and non-academic sector. To be clear on this, the objective was that this is not only a scientific committee that will help us, but that we are also actively involving a representative of other sectors, including NGOs, international organizations, the private sector, the sector of art and science, representative of local communities and indigenous people, representative of the youth community, of course. And this was very important for us. And as you can see on the screen, of the 16 members, we have currently 7 that are youth or considered as early career Russian practitioners or professionals. It's not only scientists, but it's also young practitioners within NGOs or other sectors. So yeah, this was very important for us to valorize this. And something that is very important for us is that this KCDT is also a way for us to set up a model that will be hopefully replicated within the future IPOS governance as a knowledge committee, not a development team, a knowledge committee that will hopefully be able to reproduce this equity mechanism and also hopefully even go deeper. But one thing that I wanted to talk with you and that was very important for us also was to talk about the challenges that we face in establishing this knowledge committee development team, and not only in establishing it, but also in maintaining the momentum among the different members. And I'm sure the ECOP network and the different regional nodes, especially, you have a lot of very interesting strategies to facilitate the participation of your different members. And I'm very happy to try to identify those best practices with you, try to see how your network functions, how you are able to engage with this very diverse community from all over the world, and maybe how we can be influenced by your strategy to make sure that in the future, when we will be setting up the knowledge committee of the IPOS, we'll be able to leverage those key strategies and key best practices that you have created to make sure that our communities of practice would be able to be involved very actively and in a very equitable and inclusive way during all the process of the IPOS. And I think that was my last slide. Once again, very happy to answer to every question you might have. And thank you very much for having me during this meeting together.
Thanks a lot, Luca. So for questions, I would suggest that you either type them in the chat or keep them for a bit later. So we'll have another presentation now. So Luca was outlining how a new IPOS or like a new platform could be set up or is being set up. And Ute can tell us about a platform that already exists and works. It's more regional, so it works in Europe, but it's still quite a really nice case study, I think. So Ute, take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I am Ute Jakob. I'm a marine ecologist from the Helmholtz Center for Marine Functional Biodiversity in Oldenburg, Germany. And I'm presenting today the BioAgora process. And it's when I say we, I always talk about the team behind all this. So you have Josie, Antonucci, Di Carvalho in the room, Jan-Klaas Dijker, Juliette Young, and Marie van de Waal. And so give me a second. And okay, so why do we need another science policy interface? Why do we need to improve knowledge transfer? So what we did during the first couple of months of the project, we set up a survey on identifying biodiversity challenges at the science policy interface. And while I'm not going into detail about the results of the survey, what was really the interesting part was we had one question with an empty cell where we said, what did we miss? And while we had a good representation of policymakers and the academic sector and the private sector alike, it was quite apparent that they all identified that the science policy interface should not be a one-way, that what's missing is that policymakers don't engage with science enough and are just cherry picking what suits poll strategies and what they understand, that scientific questions, on the other hand, are often decided without the local communities or the decision and policymakers, that there is a clear need for science relevant to policy development, planning and technical measures, that there is a lack of involvement from policy side and a lack of willingness by scientists and policymakers alike to engage and sharing the knowledge and practice. And we were like, wow, we are still at this after all these years. So BioAgora emerged out of such a need identified by policymakers, where the European Commission was upfront and said all the knowledge that is generated in the EU-funded project like Horizon Europe, ESA, Biodiversa Plus, and so on, is not fast enough presented in a digestible form on their desk. That's why they put out a call for implementing a science service for biodiversity, which is supposed to become a permanent structure of the Knowledge Center for Biodiversity. And so they funded BioAgora, which is coordinated by Zyke, UFZ, INRAE, and HIFMB, and really with the aim to build a multifunctional science policy interface for Europe. This has obviously a long, long history. Like the biodiversity center topics at the science policy interface really started with EPBRS or with Alternet, which some of you might know, with a project like Spiral, then with the initiative of OPLA, and then obviously with IPBS, the scientific advice mechanism, what was already mentioned, ECLIPS, which Josie and I are also part of, with the EU Biodiversity Strategy 2030, which then led to the implementation of the Knowledge Center for Biodiversity, as well as the EU Biodiversity Platform with Biodiversa Plus, with the sister projects of BioAgora, which are Respin, who will form direct pathways to IPOS, and COP4 CBD, which has the plan to directly implement pathways with a CBD and via the EU Biodiversity Platform. So the challenge, and I mean that goes hand in hand with the challenges IPOS is facing, is to formulate adequate responses to policy needs and to really have this in a way that it's effective and legitimate. So we are currently developing the functional science service for biodiversity, which will facilitate the orchestration of processes and initiatives at the science policy interface at the European level. The marine demonstration case, or now the knowledge exchange network for marine biodiversity, we are currently testing and piloting different functions of the science service, which is fully operational by the end of 2026. The overall goal is to bridge the gap between knowledge generation and its application to ratchet up the implementation of the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030 and every policy framework thereafter for biodiversity. When we say science service for biodiversity, what we also want to implement is a service to the knowledge holders, to you, to build a trusted knowledge and evidence base for biodiversity, to create open channels where everybody can join in to help inform and influence EU policies, to enhance the collaboration between different disciplines and expertise across countries, and to consolidate and better use of existing data and databases. So one of our biggest mantras really is we don't want to duplicate. We don't want to duplicate for two main reasons. We don't want to step on anyone's toes. And obviously, we don't want to duplicate for reasons of sustainability. If we duplicate, we fail. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Then this will mean that we are also a service to existing science policy interfaces, because there might be questions that are coming from the European Commission which are better suited for IPOS, or which are better suited for ICs, or better suited for ECLIPS. So this will hopefully help to orchestrate existing and upcoming science policy interfaces in the future. Then, of course, a service to society, that we not only better inform decisions, but that we also improve the outreach of scientists, that we empower citizens, businesses, and practitioners to act for biodiversity, that we can foster transdisciplinary collaboration, and finally improve the trust in science. And then last but not least, of course, be a service to policy. We are, as said, creating the scientific pillar for the Knowledge Center for Biodiversity from the European Commission. And we are currently creating and supporting a new dynamic dialogue between science and policy, so that it's, again, not just a one-way street. We will support the ambition of national, European, and international biodiversity policies, support the EU to take a leadership on a transformative pathway in biodiversity governance, and ensure relevant research priorities. What we don't want to be is like a monkey typewriter situation office. So for us, the dialogue between policy, science, and other knowledge holders is really what facilitates the transformative character of the science service for biodiversity. The way we are testing this currently is that EC staff can submit a question, or we refer to it as requests, to the Knowledge Center for Biodiversity. They have set up a ticketing system The KCBD then decides whether it's a question that can be taken care in-house. They have a lot of specialists of working groups that could, easily take a question and answer it. Or if that's not possible, they hand it over to us, to BioAgora, to the Science Service for Biodiversity, for answering the request. We have a sorting system that will decide whether the question they have put in is an urgent question that will be answered between 3 and 7 months, or whether it's more of an in-depth question, which takes, like a series of workshops that takes more of participatory processes. Then it will go to Eclipse. And here the in-depth requests can take everything from 8 to 18 months and even extended. At the moment, we are in negotiations with DG Environment to have like a very long process for the implementation of the nature restoration regulation. We do this via a couple of functions. So as said, we are not just a monkey typewriter situation, but we are creating and supporting active thematic networks, and we are really working hard to transform processes within and between science and policy. BioAgora ends in 2027, and by then we really want to have a fully established science service, which is transformative, and we will get support by a centralized web platform, which will not only allow community space for communities of practice, but also of a more rigid request handling. Not going into detail here, just to give you an overview of the marine requests we have currently on our desk. It's the cumulative impacts of offshore wind farms on marine ecosystems and their good ecological status. It's on requirements, status, and threats for marine habitats and species of the Birds and Habitats directives. It's an innovative and alternative fishing practice to reduce the environmental impact in marine protected areas from bottom trawling. And then, which is the crucial one at the moment for the implementation of the nature restoration regulation, is a gap map of the mapping status and condition status of marine habitats in Europe. We have just kicked off our knowledge exchange network for marine biodiversity in Brussels 3 weeks ago, where we really want to create this jointly. So this is not a top-down initiative. This is coming from the projects. We have invited 30 marine biodiversity focused projects to really discuss how such a knowledge exchange network will work in the long run, what they expect from the cluster, and what they what the policy side would achieve from the cluster. What was really nice, I don't know whether you can see my mouse, but the upper right corner, the picture where you see people sitting side by side, that was all the policy representatives being present at the workshop. So they really showed that they are also in it and they want to support this initiative. So what we are currently doing, or what the future activities for this cluster is the formative evaluation of the cluster. So what in 5 years from now, how do we determine if the cluster was successful, to set up a workflow with frequent meetings, science and policy, to have, of course, also a form of governance, so the cluster persists, sharing practices like training workshops, webinars, methods, tools, and products. And then really important for us and policy support to work towards a meta-dialogue that includes multiple stakeholders, multiple policy DGs, that really helps to translate messages to policy. We will develop joint statements to feed into IPOS and CBD processes. If marine biodiversity is concerned, we develop a science-based blueprint for member states to support their restoration strategies. And we will outline and join a clear pathway to impact, to provide and enable, facilitate impact across the different funded projects, not only Horizon Europe, but as I said, for the ESA, European Space Agency projects, and Biodiversa Plus. You can engage with us by following us or to subscribe to the newsletter. You can join the Knowledge Agora and email us with any question under contact@bioagora.eu. And what I forgot to put on the slides, really to engage with the processes and requests is fairly easy. If you follow us, for instance, on LinkedIn, there will be a call for knowledge and a call for experts accompanied by every request. And I think Josie can point out the next date. I think next week or the week after, we will have a request focusing on marine biodiversity, which concerns the blueprint of conservation objectives in the Natura 2000 sites. And with this, I thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Ute. So we planned to have a few minutes for any questions. So we had one in the chat from Georgios, who was asking on how can we as ECOPs become engaged as someone without any experience? I don't know if any of you want to start. Okay.
Yeah, I can start for the IPOS side, and if Ute you want to complete with the BioAgora side, very happy to give you the floor after this. Yeah, so for the IPOS, I see several ways to be involved. First of all, on a very spot-on manner, I think very happy to discuss with you of this and to introduce to you a bit much more deeply what IPOS is about, how we can work in the future, what we are currently doing, and what are the different opportunities to get involved. We are very happy to receive any feedback to continue to refine our value proposition, to make sure that we can respond as in the best possible way to the needs of the different stakeholders by UNOC. Then for the future IPOS, I see different ways on the institutional way. We are developing this knowledge, this pool of knowledge, this network of knowledge, actually, an ecosystem of IPOS, and we're very happy to tell you a bit more about this. The idea is really to make sure that we can identify as quickly as possible the best possible experts and practitioners and knowledge and right holders that would help us respond to those questions that we will be receiving in the future. So very happy if you want to get involved in this way, and yeah, let me know if you have any further question.
I mean, just to echo that, I would always recommend to get involved. Like if there's open calls, either from IPOS or from Biodiversa Plus or from us, get engaged, apply. I mean, of course, there is an application process and experts are scoped, and there's always like a cap on how many experts should be engaged in a certain request, but there's always an open call for knowledge, so everybody can contribute the knowledge they have or the experience they have, even if it's not your own project. If you know about a project or if you know about a colleague who is relevant for this, you can always reply to those and get engaged in that way. And the more you get engaged, the more you are visible, and the more or the higher the chances are to become an expert in one of the upcoming requests. That would be my recommendation.
Great, thank you. So if you have any other questions, let us know. Also, to just repeat the question we had at the very beginning, a very logistical one, but for some, there might have been some confusion about the starting hour of this webinar. So if that has happened to you, let us know also in the comments, so that we know how to avoid it in the future. But if not, and just to get you a bit warmed up for the discussion after, I have a quick Menti and hope that you can see it. So there's a few questions just for us to get a feel about how much you have been involved, what were the main issues so far in different knowledge policy, society, interfaces, not just the ones that we presented today. So if you can join the Menti with the code at the top of the screen, we'd be super happy to hear from you, and then we'll have a more direct discussion just after. Yes, Georgios, you use the code. And if there's issues with accessing it, let me know. I'll also put the code into the chat. Yes, on the website. So you go to menti.com, you input the code, and it should take you directly to the survey. And in the meantime, there's been also a question from Juana on what will be there for ECOPs and experienced ocean professionals who are willing to share their expertise aside from visibility in these platforms. I don't know, Luca, if you want to take this one, because I think for IPOS the answer is relatively clear.
Sorry, I was focusing on the Menti on the Menti slide. Could you repeat the question, please?
Maybe we'll take it after the Menti. Now that the people are in, I just wanted to fill the silence.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that.
So we had 2 people responding. I think there's about 10 of you. 9, I think. Okay. Yes, UNESCO, UNEP, FAO seem to be the leaders, with IPCC and IPBS straight after. We'll wait for another 10 seconds and then move to the, okay. Okay, so remains similar with IPCC getting a bit more head. IOC is staying there. Okay. I will move on now. There's a few more questions. So yeah, have you directly engaged with any of these interfaces before? Okay, great. So for people that have engaged, we will want to hear from you after the discussion. Yeah, if you haven't, also no problem. We also want to hear from you to see what we can do to make you engage.
And what would make the difference for you to engage and to be willing to engage with IPOS or BioAgora?
Or any other international knowledge policy society interface. Okay, I'll go on. Yeah, this one I think requires you to type your answers. You don't have to type a lot, just to give the first idea on what would be the main reasons for you to potentially get involved. And then we can expand on them later in the discussion as well, just to have some ideas on what we can start with. Loving the artwork as well. Okay. So a lot on networks and opportunities, experiences, connecting to policymakers. Engaging. Great. Go on. With the doodles remaining there. So currently, what are the main barriers for you to get involved in such processes? So we can imagine a few, but it would be good to hear from you directly on what has been, if you tried to, what has been preventing you. Okay, inexperience. Although there's one thing that has been discussed quite a lot, at least within IPOS, but Ute and Josie can tell from their side as well, is that what when we talk about knowledge, policy society interfaces, we really mean different kinds of knowledge, not necessarily specific scientific expertise or professional experience. You might have knowledge in a particular environment in which you are, that could still be relevant, and we would still, depending on the type of request that comes in, would still be super useful to have. So it's the experience here is not necessarily in the years of experience and specific academic, scientific, professional expertise that you have to have.
Yeah, just to echo what Sašo said, all knowledge is very relevant. It's obviously needs to be tailored to the request. If there is a request, as I just said, on mapping habitats, you need to know about how to map habitats. But you could also be helpful in linking to relevant projects. So don't shy away. I would always recommend read the request and think about whether you have some knowledge, either some knowledge on experts, knowledge on methods, knowledge on the topic in general. If you're not selected, or then that's that. But I would always recommend to engage.
Thanks, Ute. Okay, we'll move on. Yes, and then there's some enabling conditions for you to get involved, potentially. So these are just some that we've picked up. We can expand on them again more during the discussion, and see if there's anything else that we can do. But when we were discussing before with different ECOPs, the issues of funding and not being paid, the work not being recognized, etc. Some of the issues that you've been mentioning now with the inexperience preventing you, or perceived inexperience preventing you from participating, there's a few reasons there that we've heard before, but if there will be others, it will be great to hear after as well. I think in this case you have to rank them, which you think is the most important. Yes. Okay, it works. Okay, so I don't think Luca mentioned it before, but within IPOS, the plan is that people included in the working groups will be paid, regardless of whether they're ECOPs or traditional knowledge holders or scientists.
It's very important for us to be able to valorize every sources of knowledge, and I couldn't agree more with Ute when you said that every sources of knowledge, every type of knowledge, every knowledge system is very important. And within IPOS, we're very it's part of the key values and the key missions of the IPOS to be able to recognize all the different knowledge system and valorize in an equitable way all those different knowledge sources. And also one thing that is mentioned here in the different options, it's regarding the institutional arrangement permitting involvement. I think this was also mentioned a lot in the discussion we had with the early career ocean professionals in the consultation process for IPOS. I see that it's rising. I don't want to influence you in your votes. But yeah, that was something, especially with, for instance, the scientific institutions trying to see how like early career contracts could be including pathway to facilitate the participation of young or early career professionals. If this is something that you thought about, or is this something that is a barrier that you've been facing, would be very happy to discuss that with you. As I mentioned, we have a coalition of scientific institutions officially supporting the IPOS, and maybe it could be a solution to discuss that with them also.
Okay, and I'll move to the next question, but at the same time, I think Sarah has a question. So, yes, great. You can
Hi,
unmute
good
yourself.
morning. Hi. Good morning, Sašo. Good morning, Luke, everyone. Thank you so much for organizing that today. I'm Sarah Vienna, the ECOP African coordinator. I just want to get a hand on the discussion about funding to participate or get paid on IPOS, because what I've seen is that specific areas of expertise in ocean sciences or ocean-related sciences, we are either underpaid or there are no job opportunities, but there's still the kind of knowledge that's one of the most required kind of knowledge to fill in these gaps. For example, myself, I'm a marine taxonomist focused on fishes. And as a taxonomist in the marine environment, we are highly discarded and one of the first professionals to be hired nowadays. We have a very short job opportunities, shortage of expertise as well. In the African context, it's even worse. So I'm glad to hear there is a possibility of absorbing this network of available professionals that can find permanent jobs, but somehow they can engage with IPOS and get recognition and payment for their knowledge and for their expertise. Because in terms of ECOPs, and especially Africa, we have well-qualified African ECOPs with very good knowledge in specific areas of ocean sciences, but unfortunately, job opportunities in the continent are very, very low. So that'll open up a window. So I just wanted to tackle on that, because I know we're going to have a meeting sometime soon to discuss that. It's basically what the ECOPs, African ECOPs at least wants to hear, what are the benefits for them aside of networking, aside of getting their recognition professionally, because many of them, like I said, they already are well qualified, they are well recognized through publications, but unfortunately they are not absorbed yet in the market and the work environment. So just that I would like to add on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. I don't know, Luca, if you want to respond.
Yes, I can. I also saw that they had another hand raised, so I don't want to interrupt. But yeah, I can definitely respond if you want to this question. This was very important for us when we discussed actually in this long consultation process that we've done. Ute, do you want to respond, or should I go ahead?
No, you go ahead. Sorry, I had a giant hornet flying into my office, so I had to open the window. But I can respond after. Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. No, yeah, just wanted to say that this was something that was raised in the consultation process that we've done last year as very important, and also this payment, that it will not only be, for instance, for compensate for the time. For instance, if we compensate a scientist, we also want to compensate like a practitioner, a small-scale fisher that will participate in a project or in a session, a working group of IPOS, and that we do so in a way that recognize the knowledge rather than compensate for the time or like the loss that would be that would be faced for not being on the boat or not being able to work to fish clearly. Yeah, this is very important for us to have a clear way to valorize all the knowledge system in an equitable way, and valorize all the different knowledge and rights holders in this way. And payment for this and compensation for this knowledge is a way for us to acknowledge the fact that we want to work with the different knowledge and rights holders.
Thanks, Luca. Ute?
I'm going to be the Debbie Downer here, and I would advise to be cautious. For instance, in Eclipse, we don't pay our experts. We have the possibility to have scientific assistants joining a request, and of course, they get paid. We have the possibility to fund people in need during the duration of the request. But that is really the exception rather than the rule. For us, the experts provide 10% of their time. They need to bring a letter from their institution that is in line with their working contract. And the reason why we don't pay our experts in general, first, we would fear that that is not really sustainable. And the second is that we, so far with the Eclipse experience, is that people really value the experience and impact they have on policies. In BioAgora, the situation currently is a little different. The KCBD, if they are doing short requests, they pay their experts. At the moment, we are testing a mechanism that is tailored to the EU-funded community. So as I said in my introduction, the Commission really wants the knowledge produced in the EU-funded projects to be on their desk in a more digestible form. So in the future, there will be an amendment to projects that they have to provide some person months to support the science service for biodiversity. Of course, we will test other mechanisms where payment is an option or where other compensation is an option. I mean, this is there's a lot of science policy interfaces out there. So there is a lot of options or different options available. So I urge you to be careful. And also, and I don't know how you are planning doing this in IPOS, but normally, or at least in Europe, it's honorary payments. So it's not a salary, which is something you also need to be aware of. It's not a job opportunity. It's an opportunity for an honorary payment for a short amount of time or a longer amount of time. But just to be aware that this is not part of the job market. And I'm sorry for being the bad cop here.
No, but I mean, before I pass back to Luca, I was also going to say that, I mean, even within IPOS, it's going, currently the plan is for it to be the same. It's honorary payment. So it's a payment for this service, for this expertise that you provide, but it's not going to be a full-on job. It might help with recognition of your work for future employers, but we cannot solve the short-term research contracts or any other job problems in different countries. As I mean, it's potentially not as problematic in Europe, although it is still an issue for a lot of ECOPs that we are in short underpaid contracts. There's very little opportunities, etc. So IPOS will not be able to solve that on its own. And it is also true that what Ute is mentioning, that most existing science policy society interfaces do not pay their experts as a rule. I mean, there can be exceptions, but generally it's not. So IPOS will be trialing this. And currently it is one of the commitments that we have. But we will see how it will work. It is a massive part of the budget that IPOS is planning to have is the payments. I cannot say the fancier word. But yes, Luca, if you want to add.
I just want to say, I'm sorry if I raised the expectation on a higher level, but definitely aligned with what Sašo you just said. Just wanted to say to the question of sustainability, that is very key for us also, like of the system. What we want to do with IPOS in the coming years actually is to have a test phase of 2 years that will help us test this model that we are currently proposing. And during this test phase, the idea is to work only on a limited number of projects. So to really have this limited capacity IPOS that will help us see if not only this compensation and payment model of course, honorary payment, not salaries, if it works, but also if the vision that we have works, if the governance model works, if it's possible to, if the results that we expected are corresponding to what we have in reality, etc. So yeah, it's definitely something that we want to test in this phase for the next coming years, and yeah, because we really want to make sure that our model is sustainable and replicable in a much more higher level in the future.
And then I think linked to this, there was a question from Juana before who asked that aside from visibility, what will be there for ECOPs and experienced social professionals who are willing to share their expertise? So I think we partly addressed it, and Ute also mentioned that a lot of the people that get involved within Eclipse work are there for the visibility, for the impact of their work. Is there anything else that has been discussed? Yes, Ute.
Sorry, it's just so I have this hornet in my room and a giant truck is passing. It's stars are aligning. So I mean, what we really discussed also in the line of BioAgora, and we discussed it with the policy officers, a lot of times we as scientists have something like, well, this model, what I just created, can save the world. And sometimes we lack the direct connections to the policymakers. But here, really, the incentive for scientists to provide knowledge, or for other stakeholders to provide the knowledge, is really the direct engagement with the policymakers and the member states, in our case, via the EU biodiversity platform, so that they see that the work is actually put into practice. So it's not a paper tiger or some report nobody reads, but that it's something that is actually put in practice. And for a lot of knowledge holders, in our experience, that is a good incentive.
A lot. And then linking to the Mentimeter before, we also really wanted to know, like, I mean, obviously some of this has been discussed already in terms of the job opportunities, recognition, payments. But is there anything else that you as ECOPs have in mind that you would need for the platforms or for these interfaces to put in place for you to engage? So we've addressed funding. Luca mentioned the possibility of altering the research contracts with the scientific institutions so that there is this possibility to engage. Ute mentioned that for people working on EU-funded projects that there will be a requirement to put in some person months for engagement for this, but it is only then relevant. I mean, it is relevant for Europe, and it might affect early career researchers, at least, because a lot of them do work on EU projects. But is there anything else that you have in mind that might be useful for us to consider, or that we should consider going forward to make sure that ECOPs can have a seat around the table and to contribute? Reference letters. Okay, that's a new one. We haven't heard that one before, but I guess it should be possible to provide something if we engage, and if there is a direct engagement already. Anything else? Yes, Ute.
I mean, maybe that is more for us, like for IPOS and BioAgora and Eclipse food for thought. So we have also an early career network within BioAgora, but we could also think about having, you know, something like trainees that can accompany, especially the long-term requests, where they can gain experience in how to handle requests and questions from policy side or from member states in your case. So maybe that is a program we could develop together. And then also, of course, I certainly understand the need for funding for early careers, to come up with a funding scheme, what could be the payment in such a network. I mean, no, it will not exceed honorary contracts. I'm going to repeat that, so not to raise false hopes, but that would be something we could think about, so that they, based on expertise, that ECOPs could join given marine related requests and gain some experience that way.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, I see in the chat that Evgenia, you've mentioned job shadowing and traineeship. I think it was part of the solutions that were discussed in the consultation process that we've launched last year. This idea of facilitating job shadowing, maybe within the future IPOS working groups. So yeah, I think this is very interesting, and very happy to discuss on how possibly can we arrange that. But yeah, this has been mentioned in the past, and very happy to discuss how to implement this in the reality.
Yes, and it brings me to the point that it's been raised a bit during the Mentimeter, so is this connection to policymakers and how to engage, and not knowing how to engage both with the science policy interfaces and with policymakers themselves. So as Lucas said, the shadowing or mentorship programs or things like that the platforms could potentially offer have been discussed. It's also why we asked about whether mentorship is something that you are looking for, but potentially should be rebranded or reformulated into more of a shadowing. And also Ute mentioned that for the current experts that engage within BioAgora, the recognition and impact and this direct connection to policymakers is something that is important. Which also shows that even more established experts in Europe do not necessarily have this link to policymakers in any case. It is a bit it's a difficult field to navigate. So potentially this could be something that we can try to facilitate. If you have other ideas, or like what you would specifically want to know, if that is mentorship, shadowing, having a couple of people working with policy, providing some kind of basic trainings, any kinds of ideas that you might have, please feel free to share them, and we can, like, I mean, for IPOS, because it's still being in the process of development, we can suggest, I mean, we can see what can be possible also within the funding that we will eventually have. And Ute can also see, I mean, can also tell us what is possible within their process, because they're also still developing the science service for biodiversity in Europe. It is functioning, but it is evolving. Yes, Ute, please.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know enough about IPOS to know what your plans are, but for BioAgora, it's obviously going in a similar direction as Eclipse, so that at some point when the project ends, it's a self-sustaining mechanism, which means that the requesters need to pay for their requests. The European Commission will not fund us until eternity. They made that very clear. And then you obviously need to come up with a price list. What kind of request involves what costs, and where is costs available for having, you know, paid experts, or at least have expert paid that are in need of it, and things like this. So that is it's a very long process, and it's very challenging, because at the moment, of course, while we're in the testing phase, we receive a lot of requests. Policymakers are all over us. This will change once they have to pay for it. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, it has also been a discussion within IPOS, I think, a bit. I mean, for us, slightly less, because we are not yet using the services, but there's been a discussion about how do we choose which requests we take on, how many from particular states. Because currently the idea is that the services will not be paid by the requester, but it has been put on the table before that potentially it will have to be, and then how do we make sure that developed countries versus developing countries do not pay the same rates, and that is equitable. So for now they're meant to be free, and I think Luca can expand more because he's more central to the development than I am. But it has been a discussion, yes, how do we manage the request, because we will not be able to take everything.
Yeah, I think you've summarized that very well. Just on the relation between the requesting and the payments, the funding for this request and the work that will be produced after. The objective for now is that during the test phase, so the next year that we will have as of mid 2025, there is no direct relation between the request and the funding. Our objective is to develop fundings from actually 3 main sources that will be a voluntary contribution from states, not directly related to specific requests. So states that want to officially support IPOS and the functioning of IPOS rather than specific projects. Also then working with international funding organizations and development banks, for instance, and we are actively discussing with some of them to provide like a global funding, once again, not directly specifically related to one project. And the third source would be through philanthropy and private foundations. Once again, with this same objective that it's rather for funding this test phase and the different projects, but not one specific projects. So just for you to say that the different projects that we will be working on in the test phase will not be directly related to the fundings, and which I think which directs me towards this idea of maybe one of the projects that we could work on in this test phase could be a demand from a coalition of early career Ocean professionals to ask this question of how specifically the knowledge of youth and early career Ocean practitioners and professionals is considered in one specific topic, is valorized and actively involved in, for instance, the development of marine spatial planning or topics such as topics like this one. I think this is the kind of topic that IPOS could work on. For instance, the pilot project that we have in Costa Rica, it's really focused on the way one of this knowledge system is actively involved in the implementation of preservation and ocean conservation policies, especially in the context of the global biodiversity framework. We work specifically on the way the knowledge from small-scale fisher communities is actively involved and recognized in the implementation of this concretely of the 30 by 30 objective in Costa Rica. So maybe we could imagine a project that would be similar, like trying to identify the way the knowledge from early career ocean professionals and practitioners is considered and is valued in the implementation of one specific ocean policy. That could be something, a project for IPOS. I don't want to say that it will be, because it will be on demand, and but very happy to consider this with you if you're interested.
Hey, is there anything else that ECOPs would like to raise? Because I feel like most of the time we've spent talking on our end, and it would be nice to hear more from your side as well. I appreciate it can be hard because we've thrown a lot of information at you, and now we're asking for relatively specific things to give to tell us, and it might be difficult to come up with them on the spot, but I've shared mine and Lucas's email in the chat. So for the IPOS side, you can get in touch with us, and we'll also try to prepare this white paper that I mentioned in the beginning. Maybe I'll mention it again because some people have joined late. So just as a follow-up to this webinar, and there's another webinar this evening for the people on the other side of the world. the plan was that if there are very particular things that emerge across the ECOPs in both webinars, that we might organize follow-up webinars or discussions, or engage with Eugenia and the ECOP program nodes to develop those specific topics a bit more. Otherwise, we'll just try to provide a white paper on how to meaningfully engage ECOPs in international knowledge policy society interfaces. We'll be happy to engage more with also Ute and Josie with the European established ones that have some experience to give us as well on what is possible and not. And then have this white paper presented in some way at UNOC. But yes, Olusola.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, my internet is not dependable because I'm on transit. Yeah, thank you very much for all the discussion. And I just want to add that I can't speak for ECOP leadership, but I can speak as a member. That I think the summary of what is being discussed here today is that ECOP should not just be an organization that we see to fulfill our mission, where we need to fill form to, gather some data as we get. So, and specifically, ECOP is asking for our inclusion in majority of what is being done, and to a large extent for this inclusion to be compensated to a large extent. This is what I think ECOP is saying, and thank you very much for Lucas and Ita for the way you responded. The expectation is high, but you've been able to make it clear what is in the proposition. So I'm sure ECOPs knows the way to go along with this. So my conclusion would be that the future IPOS has a lot of things to offer. So it is not only to say I can do this. I think the most important thing is to be able to demonstrate what you think, what you are saying you can do. So there will be a lot of engagement, like Lucas mentioned, but it's just not going to be by what we can say, it's going to be by what we can do. So I think, Lucas, if it's possible and it is right, you can include that if anyone will be available in Nice for the One Ocean Conference, IPOS will be present. So it's an opportunity to attend IPOS meeting, both for all the Ocean Conference and One Ocean Science meeting at the Nice, the Ocean Conference that will follow later. Please attend, be part of IPOS, and see that you can meet people in real time and possibly get connected with other people who will be attending, and that could be an opportunity for you to know better how to get engaged. So this is what I can say. So thank you very much for the platform. We are looking forward to more engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. So in response to just the comment that just got the chat that just came in. So the way IPOS for now is planning to engage experts is there will be a self-nomination process set up where people will be able to nominate themselves as experts in a particular topic. There will be a short survey. You'll provide I think current plan is to have like a short motivational letter and a CV, and then you'll join a pool of experts, or what we will be calling a knowledge network. And then this will be where we try to source experts from, and I'll let Luca explain more. And then I think for Ute, you can also explain more, but I think in general, BioAgora Eclipse work through open call. So there is a request and there is an open call, so then you can directly respond to that call with your expertise and then see if you're selected or not. There isn't a permanent pool of experts that will be consulted every time. Yes, Ute?
Exactly. So we have three open calls. One is the open call for experts, where similar to what Sašo described, you apply to a certain call, and then your application will be scoped, and then you will either be nominated or not. The other open call is for knowledge, where when we receive the request, we call it the scoping phase. As I was saying in the beginning, we are really trying to avoid duplication. So if we get a request with the open call, we really want to make sure that what we are doing is not either already done elsewhere or is ongoing elsewhere, so that if it's ongoing elsewhere, we can at least get in contact with the initiative, with the project, and see whether we could benefit from each other or whether it's a hard no from our side and we turn down the request and tell the requester, look, it's done by XYZ somewhere else. And then the other open call is the open call for review. So we have in Eclipse, we have a review of the methods protocol, of the document of work, and of the final product. And you are also very much invited to join that open review. And as I said in the beginning, sometimes if you're not selected as an expert at first, join the review process, join the open knowledge process, because by this, you already receive recognition. You are in the database, and then as soon as people are aware that you are very reactive, that you're very engaged, then you will also be selected as an expert. It's similar to the IPOS process. A lot of IPOS applications get turned down because of all kinds of reasons. But as the more you show up, the more you are recognized, the more it's likely that you succeed and become an expert.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Ute, and I fully agree with what was just said. I just want to say two things. First, the IPOS way of working, as Sašo mentioned, will be very similar to what Ute just presented. I just want to add that this idea of the knowledge network on our side, it's the objective that we have is to make it as agile and as efficient as possible. So we are not sure yet if we want to create a new network that we will need to, on our side, make active and keep the momentum with every member of, or if we rather not reproduce and not replicate what already exists and rather facilitate this through relation with key networks, such as the Early Career Ocean program, Ocean Professional Program, and it's also part of the reason why we want to be involved with the Ocean Decade, because this network of the Ocean Decade, it's really powerful, it's really diverse, and I think through relations with programs such as ECOP, we can manage to facilitate the participation of a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of different experts and practitioners and professionals and researchers to every project of the IPOS, without recreating a new heavy system that would be too difficult to implement and to monitor. But yeah, very happy to express for instance, to have a MOU with the ECOP program to officialize this relation and to try to define some processes to facilitate the participation of different members of the ECOP program. So yeah, very happy to discuss that. I think it's one of our key objectives for UNOC to develop this key relations with key organizations such as the ECOP program.
Thanks. I think, Josie, you had your hand up. Do you still want to add something?
Oh, yeah, no, it was just about complementing what Ute said. She said at the beginning, but I saw that there are new people, how to find these open calls, call for knowledge and experts and reviewers. It's in LinkedIn, so you can follow BioAgora and Eclipse on LinkedIn, just to complement that. So a way to engage.
Thanks. And then, well, since we are coming to the end of this session, thanks a lot for all of the engagement in the Menti, in the chat with the comments, the directly talking to us. As mentioned before, if you have any further thoughts, feedback, ideas, come to us. I think in the chat you can find mine, Lucas's, Ute's emails. So we might not respond immediately, but we will respond. And Josie's as well now. So let us know, and we'll do our best to try to see what is possible to do to both within our own platforms that we are either creating or developing for or improving to improve the situations, and to also write this white paper so we can bring this to the wider attention of knowledge policy society interfaces at UNOC, and then we can push for better general engagement of ECOPs. But if there's nothing else, thank you very, very much for joining us, for taking the time, and for your engagement, and hope that we manage to do something great together over the coming weeks and months.
Thank you very much, Sašo, for how brilliantly you moderated this session, and thank you once again to the ECOP program for facilitating this, and also to our colleagues Ute and Josie for participating. Thank you very much. I was very happy to be there with you this morning.
I can echo that. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. See you later.
Do you want us to stay maybe for a few minutes to do a quick debrief?
Sure.
Hi, Lucas. Sorry, it didn't work as I planned because of the change, and the internet is not friendly here today, as I'm heading towards the airport to get back to Lagos. So I'm not sure if I will be there in the evening. So please bear with me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Yeah. Thank you very much, Sola, for your participation and for your words at the end. I will let you know what is being said for this evening session, and we'll make sure to have someone here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks. See you soon.
The people still joining us. So we have a second session, and if you know people that might be interested, please make sure to spread the word. I think it's a huge opportunity, and you should definitely spread the word in your networks and your colleagues. And thanks again for joining. Make sure to reach out through the different links that everyone provided. I would suggest not to miss this opportunity. And thanks again. See you in the next one. So we will stay in the same link, right? Maybe we just wait 1-2 minutes so everybody drops out.
I mean, if not, we can also remove them, right?
Yes, exactly. That's my next suggestion. But I think almost everyone dropped out. Maybe not. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if Eugenia wants to stay for the debrief.
Yeah, I won't take out everything. That's for sure.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for this great webinar. Can we just maybe stop the recording before you start to debrief?
The first question is just that we just want to have a first idea of which of the existing large global, or some of them are European, but mostly they're global, knowledge or science policy society interfaces have you been aware of so far? Okay, let's remove this so we can see all of the answers. Okay, so World Ocean Assessment and ice seeding and IPCC, the usual suspects. Okay, so compared to this morning when we had the same session, but in the morning, Gesamt is now getting more recognition than before. Yeah, I think there's probably all that I can expect from this group. Then the next question is on, have you directly engaged with any of these knowledge policy society interfaces before? They can also be local or regional, not necessarily the global ones that I mentioned, that were mentioned on the first slide. And it's perfectly fine either way. So if you have, we'll be interested to know your experiences. If you haven't, we'll also be interested to know if there's anything to do that we can do to make you engage if you're interested. Okay, then going forward, this one you have to type, I'm sorry. But what is for you the main reason for you to potentially get involved? So like what would interest you about potentially getting involved in IPOS, in BioAgora, or in any of the other knowledge or science policy society interfaces that you know about? Okay. Diversity of opinions, I think it's new. I think we usually get a lot of recognition, experience, and networking. So I think this came from 2 people, so we can still wait a bit. Learning about policymaking, yes, it's also coming out sometimes from discussions we had with ECOPs before, and also this morning, and having an impact. And influence policies, using skills. Excellent, thank you. And then the next one, this one I think it also requires typing, is what are the main barriers for you to get involved? So we know in general what usually limits ECOPs in engaging, but just to hear from you for these specific types of interfaces, what prevents you from engaging? Not enough experience. Okay, we'll address this. We've also addressed it this morning. It was also the first answer then. How to get involved also we'll mention. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes, I think we will come back to all of this. Bureaucracy, yes. Okay, so we'll keep this for the discussion after, and then come back to give you our ideas on what we can do to make it better, and then if you have any other ideas, barriers, please let us know. And then the final one is, what would be the enabling conditions? So these are some of the solutions that have been mentioned before during the consultation. For example, Luca mentioned, or from the surveys or interactions that we had with the ECO program before, with the coordinators, global ones and regional ones. But this is obviously not an exhaustive list, but those are some of the possible solutions that have been mentioned before. So I think you're just asked to rank them in terms of how important they are for you. And perhaps just to clarify, with mentorship programs, sometimes we call them mentorship, sometimes people talk about like work shadowing. So especially to get experience with policy processes and policy making. So it depends on how those can be structured. Okay. So while this is still up, before I remove it, maybe we'll it's best we start with addressing this, and then we'll go back through the other ones and any other questions that you might have. So in terms of funding and being paid, this is something that we've also discussed quite a lot this morning. So Luca hasn't mentioned it, but within IPOS, the plan is that experts engaged will be paid. So it will be honorary payment. It will not be jobs such. It will not be salaries, but there will be payments for some of the time. I mean, there will be a set amount of money paid for the experts engaged in the action request process that Luca mentioned. We still need to, as you know, IPOS doesn't exist yet, so it still needs to be trialed, and we will see how sustainable this is. The current estimates of our budget indicate it's going to be a large majority of our budget will go towards that, so it's still a bit questionable whether we can maintain it and how much funding will have to be raised. Most knowledge policy society interfaces do not pay their experts, so it's more linked to impact recognition, things like that. But I think here Ute can expand a little bit because they have a more diverse system in place already.
Yes, thank you. So I obviously understand the need for payment, but in Eclipse, for instance, our mantra is experts don't get paid. They get asked to volunteer 10% of their time for a given request, and then they also need to bring a letter of confirmation from their workplace that they are allowed to spend 10% of their time on a request. Of course, this requires to have a job. So there is a process in place if you don't have a job. So if you are in need, Eclipse will also provide an honorary contract. But as Sašo said, that is not replacing a job. Like, this is really on an honorary basis. What we also do in Eclipse, we provide research assistance to a given request. Like, if there is a lot of groundwork needed, then we will hire research assistants. This then will be a short-term contract, but we are not, unfortunately, offering jobs. I mean, I work for free for Eclipse and for BioAgora, and so do my colleagues. So this is the reality, because what we believe is that the incentive for the scientific community or for other stakeholders is really to have their work being policy relevant. So what we ask the requesters in turn, in our case, the policy officers from the European Commission, that they enable that the experts are seen, that they are seen by their policy colleagues, that they are seen by member states, and that they even can discuss with member states how the work should be taken up and what can be achieved with it. But in general, we are not providing funding. That is the harsh truth.
And also, just to be clear, it's not just Eclipse that doesn't do it. It's almost none of these platforms provide it. IPOS is trialing this. We'll see how it goes. So like currently, we're also trying to still get funding for the testing period, and for the testing period, it will work this way. And then afterwards, we'll see what works or doesn't. And before I give the word to Andrea, I just wanted to also come back to the point that Ute raised, that was mentioned before in some of the answers, on the need for policy relevance, for influencing policies and law. So this is something that Eclipse or BioAgora and IPOS are both kind of designed to do from the start, because they're meant to respond to specific requests for knowledge. So they're not going to be producing, or they're not producing reports like IPCC or IPBES are doing every 5 years, which are these massive global compendiums of current knowledge. But they're responding to specific policy requests, so there is a direct link to the policy world. And there is also a thing that I think Ute mentioned it in her presentation, is that a lot of scientists, even senior scientists, do not really have access to policymakers. So this is not something that is only hampering ECOPs. It's a thing that is kind of spread out through the academic world. But then, yes, I'll give the word to Andrea now before we go to the rest of it.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much to all the speakers as well and for organizing this. I've more of a question now. It's more of a like to open the dialogue for it, because these like being part of all of these institutions, or being part of let's say ECOP. I'm in the Central America, I'm part of the Central American node, and all of these are based on volunteering work. But then knowing that, and it's that working for free, right? Like Ute was like putting it that way, because it's essentially that. It's how is still we give access to ECOPs to spaces where like policy, like where decisions are happening, because something that I've just been noticing is that still you enter, let's say, ECOP, and there's still this barrier in how to get access to these big spaces where conversation is happening. And I think that for an early career, as me, for example, it's still okay. There is like the first one here was funding and getting paid, because you still are building your career, and yet you're still working for free, and you think, okay, there's this perception that you get access to it, but to more like bigger spaces, but still that is not happening. So it's more of like, how can we make that available, that is still okay, we're working towards ECOPs having a space, like there's still like funding specifically for ECOPs to get access to funds to go to places or to be part of decision making for different agreements. So that was more of like not a question really, but more like a long comment or like an open dialogue. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot. No, Ute, do you want to go first?
Yes, so thank you very much. I think you tackled a couple of things, and I will try to address them well, as much as I can, and then give the floor back to Sašo. So my first recommendation is, if you want to have a seat at the table where decisions are made, is an advice I got myself from a dear colleague. It's to show up. To show up where things are happening. So what that means in terms of Eclipse or the science service, or in the future IPOS. So if there is calls for knowledge, if there is calls for experts, if there is calls for review, get engaged. Especially with, like a community like IPOS, I urge you to get engaged with review processes from the IPOS assessments where relevant, or with the World Ocean Review, or other relevant documents that are out for open review. Because the more you show up, and the more like the decision makers see that there is a huge engagement from ECOPs, then you will become an expert at some point. It's like, if you show up, if you build the trust with decision makers, then they will recognize and will validate and trust your opinion and your support. And that's how you get a seat at the table. It's a long process, but that's how it works. Another advice I have, the science policy interface, you hardly get a full postdoctoral fellowship for 2 to 5 years and working at the science policy interface. That happens in projects or in other incentives, but just on a request basis, supporting decision making, that is just not happening. So here also my recommendation, while it's important to show up at these things, also make sure you work on your career and you work on applications. I mean, again, with ECOP, with this network, you should have quite some leverage to apply for different things and have really a good shot at it, but really take care for that you have a job, because as I said, that's not what you will get at the science policy interface at first. I mean, I can only speak for the European Commission. There is trainees and internships and things like this, but that's obviously also not an academic position. You need to be aware of that. So it's a little bit of keeping the balance between what you're like, if you really want to go into the decision making and you want to work at the
science policy interface and make your career there, I urge you to show up, but I also urge you to get a job. The question on travel grants and like when these working groups meet, that differs from incentive to incentive. I know that IPOS has a program for early careers to join the plenaries, but you have to apply. Like this is not giving out like, vouchers, but you really have to apply. With Eclipse, when there's meetings from the expert working groups, there are travel funds, especially for those who are not covered by their home institution. So we would never ask an early career or, well, an unemployed academic representative to join something like this and pay from their own private expenses. That is not ethical and shouldn't happen. But as said, that differs from all kinds of places. There are travel grants, but most of the time you have to apply and prove that you are in need. And I think that tackles like maybe your first 2 points, and I give the floor to Sašo.
Yes. And also just kind of try to bunch together also the question from Anna in the chat with the response. So in IPOS, basically the working groups as imagined would be hybrid, so they're not necessarily meant to have to meet in person, but that doesn't mean that there wouldn't necessarily be funding for travel. So for example, one of the pilot projects that Luca mentioned on Costa Rica, which includes small-scale fishers in Costa Rica and a lot of young people there in terms of how they can adapt or co-create the 30 by 30 process in the Costa Rican waters. That pilot project has funding for a select number of both local and indigenous knowledge holders and small-scale fishers, including young fishers, to come to UNOC in Nice to be. We cannot ensure that the decision makers will listen to them, but they will be there. So something like this, those kinds of things are possible and are to a certain extent budgeted, but as Ute has said, yeah, we cannot provide it for everything. In terms of the access to engaging and access to decision makers as such, so we recognize that there is an issue also with ECOPs getting engaged, and then you're in a room potentially with a lot of very senior people who do not take you seriously. So it's not a really equitable position always. So within IPOS, we haven't really done a full-on request yet. So we cannot tell you how it will work, but the guidelines that we have established would require every expert that is invited into a group to be given the same weight, regardless whether they're ECOP or not. And the process is supposed to be led by the member of the IPOS Secretariat, etc. So they should be ensuring this. But we'll hopefully see how this works out in the next 2 years when IPOS will be testing. And the last point that I wanted to do on this was linked to what Ute was saying about kind of engage if you want to get this access. And this is not linked to IPOS or BioAgora now, it's also just my personal experience from my own PhD and a bit before. So a lot of the people that work for, at least in European Commission, but I think it's quite common in national competent authorities, have been researchers before. They've transitioned from research, they've done PhDs, maybe they haven't worked in research after that, but they've done PhDs, and a lot of them do realize how difficult it is to do it and how difficult it is to transition into jobs after. And they're often prepared to help. So, for example, a lot of my PhD was built on endless emailing of people who work on policies that were interesting to me, and then discussing with them and trying to make sure that what we discuss is also to a certain extent useful for them, to the point that now I have personal connections with some key people that work in different directorates general of the European Commission. And I obviously also have a job now, but it was a useful thing for me to have this direct connection. It's also, in the end, when you're, for example, nearing the end of your PhD and you just send them your, not papers, because they will not have time to read them, but policy briefs or like summaries or things like that, and you can see engagement. Like I've noticed this year, 3 years after I finished my PhD, that someone from the commission was quoting back little tidbits of what I told him 3 years before. So it might not be like this grand thing of like us as scientists coming there and telling decision makers what to do and they take it on, because that will also never happen. But you can see the influence, but it does come from quite a lot of work and also then some luck, because not everyone will be responding. So some of I'm quite sure that in almost any institution you will find eventually someone who will be willing to help to a certain degree. And then you latch onto those and you build from there. But it was my own experience which worked out, but not yes, it's building trust. So, and it's easier when you have like because in the end, then when you have one person there that's prepared to speak for you, then you might get access to other meetings through them, or at least you know what is happening. I'm not sure if I'm missing any other questions right now in the chat. Don't see any. Then I just wanted to quickly comment on some of the other things raised here. So with the academic and professional recognition, I think Ute has mentioned like part of the work within these kinds of interfaces is for people involved to get recognition, both for being part of the review processes or groups. With the institutional arrangements, we also know that sometimes, especially for ECOPs, for early career researchers, it's a bit difficult to get engaged because you have often a bit difficult contracts with your institutions. So within IPOS, there is some work ongoing, but it's also quite early. So there is a coalition of about 35, 40 scientific institutions that have endorsed IPOS so far in all 5 continents. So there is some work starting to see whether PhDs and postdocs engaged with it, or potentially also master students if they're paid within those institutions, can have a clause in their contracts that would allow them to engage in this kind of work, similar to what Ute was mentioning before, that they have this 10% employer consent. But yes, I'll also leave the word there to supplement.
No, yeah, just quickly to add on, I mean, I'm obviously not aware of the situation in all the countries where you're coming from, but I can say at least for the European countries, the funding schemes change. So there is a bit of change in terms of research now. Next to always has to have an impact, has to be policy relevant. And so I think it will get easier. It will take time. It's not ideal yet. If you are funded by the German Research Foundation, they don't let you step one bit aside. They want you to work on your contract and that's it. But I think there's a lot of changes going on with the policy needs from the scientific community. So hopefully we see a lot of change in the next couple of years.
Then there were a few other things that came out before. So one thing that also came out in the morning was on the inexperienced. So what we emphasized in the morning is that when we talk about different knowledges here, both for us in IPOS and for Ute, she can supplement as well, is that we don't necessarily mean that your knowledge needs to be scientific expertise. So we will be looking for, depending on a request, we will be looking for local knowledges or specific knowledges that you might have even as a super early career researcher, not necessarily coming from a long academic career, lots of papers and the usual metrics. Obviously, it depends on the type of request coming in, but really for us, the perceived inexperience of people in the beginning of their careers is not necessarily a barrier to getting involved. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, maybe what I'm going to add what I said in the beginning, and show up. I mean, if you're not like one of the leading experts or co-chairs of the expert working group, then that's that. But you can always be a knowledge provider. You can answer the call for evidence. You can answer the call for review and get used to the processes. Another thing we were just discussing this morning as an idea, but obviously it's not implemented yet, whether, you know, together with IPOS, BioAgora, Eclipse, and other SPIs, we could think about a mentorship program that early ECOPs could accompany a request as, you know, either with an observer status or with something they would benefit and get a feel for the water temperature, for like what's needed. But as said before, don't shy away of engaging with a call for knowledge or with a call for review. Get engaged, even if your review is not considered as relevant in the end by the experts, but you were part of the process. So really, as I said, show up. That's my biggest advice to you, really.
Yes, thank you, Ute. And then it's also the how to get involved question. So basically, there are these open calls that come out that Ute mentioned in the newsletter or on the websites. Within IPOS, this will potentially work similarly. It's not set up yet entirely. The other part will be there will be a self-nomination process. So basically, there will be a knowledge network that will be like a pool of experts that would be like the first call. So the self-nomination is supposed to be very simple. So it will ask you to upload your CV, 200, 300 word motivational text on like your expertise and on which topics you would like to be consulted. And then there will be a few questions about where you come from, where your expertise is, because you might be from Latin America, but your expertise is in New Zealand as well. So there will be a few questions like that to just classify you. And then there will be, when a specific request in a specific region would come in, we would then look through this pool of existing pool of experts, and then there will be another layer of scoping on who would then get invited to join. And then depending on how much expertise we have within the existing knowledge network, we might need to open calls for expertise or for reviewers, as Ute has outlined. Yes, Andrea, please.
Yeah, right, because I know, well, my next question was related to that, how to getting involved in one of the pilots, because in you're mentioning something really important that I relate to, because I grew up in Central America, in El Salvador, but also my expertise is not in El Salvador. So although I'm like slowly coming back for like the specifically the Eastern Pacific Marine Corridor, because I work on migratory species on sharks. But yeah, so that is interesting to see as well. Just because I see when earlier it was shared the geographic distribution and how to like make people part of these programs. But so then essentially it's just regardless of where is your expertise, you can still, in the sense of like geographically, you can still apply. Let's say I'm particularly interested in the one for indigenous people in Costa Rica. So then you just send it out, right? You just like go and upload your thing and apply. Is that it?
Technically, it could work that way. I think in this case, the project is already ongoing. So the first meeting happened in late February.
Okay.
And they have a process ongoing. So but Luca will be able to tell you all about it, because he's, I think, our IPOS Spanish speaker and the one leading that. So there might be still options to engage with it, or to follow it. I don't know exactly where. I just know what is generally happening within that pilot project. But then afterwards, if there will be, for example, other requests coming from Costa Rica or from other Central American countries, then it will basically be, the process will be like the request comes in, it is evaluated by a node of IPOS that is there or the closest. if it responds to these global objectives that Luca has been mentioning, so Global Biodiversity Framework, SDGs, or
The BBNJ.
BBNJ, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And then if it does relate to those and it is formulated in a way that it can be directly useful, then the IPOS team will start looking for experts. So if you're already in the base, you might be contacted straight on. And if you'll be looking for more, it will be published through the social media websites, etc. And then you can also self-nominate, and then it's a process of selecting the group that will represent different kinds of knowledges as well, because it is one of the things that we would like to have. So it wouldn't just be always scientists, but it would be local representatives, indigenous knowledge holders, private sector, UN bodies, or international bodies, or the national authorities, etc. So like it will depend from request to request. I think on that also, Eclipse has a very established model that seems to work really well that we are trying to copy. So if I'm missing any of the key elements, I think Ute can supplement them in how the process works to get directly involved.
No, I mean, you covered it very well. It's as I said earlier, it's really to pay attention to the calls that come out. As said, there's call for experts, then there's call for knowledge. The calls for knowledge are really, really important because, and I think IPOS has the same goal, we don't want to duplicate. So we don't want to duplicate for several reasons. We don't want to step on anyone's toes. So if we receive a policy request and the work is done already elsewhere, we will refer the requester to where the work is done. We will not replicate it, because not to step on anyone's toes and not to waste resources. So if you see these call for knowledge and you have an idea about a project you might be involved in, about a working group you are involved in, something the ECOPs are doing, please answer those call for knowledge. And then there's always, as I said, the call for review, where you can also register as a reviewer and provide your insights on the reports or products the experts are coming up with. With the call for experts, as Sašo said, it's an application process. You have to provide your CV and fill in several forms. They probably differ from Eclipse to IPOS, but it's a form where you, of course, need to explain your intent. And as said, the more you show up, the more likely it will be that you will be selected as an expert.
Thank you. Yes, so this is then, I think, covering the how to engage questions. If there's more questions, obviously, let us know. I think, Parvin, I'm not sure for submitting proposals in terms of what should IPOS do. In that case, it is states. Apart from the catalyst service that Luca mentioned, which is for kind of raising issues that can be brought up to the other actors. In that case, it could be on an individual basis, but you would have to be accredited to IPOS in some way. So IPOS would have to already recognize you as a relevant knowledge holder or linked to a relevant institution, which doesn't necessarily need to be a state. It could be an NGO, but we will not have the manpower to process proposals coming from just anyone. Like that would be too overwhelming. So it will have to be a kind of accreditation type thing for the requests themselves. So for like when we provide knowledge, in our case, it would come from the states. So it will have to be a ministry requesting a certain service so that we can provide a policy relevant knowledge for that specific request. And I think it's similar for what Eclipse is doing, it's just it's limited to the European Commission.
So for BioAgora, it's the European Commission. It's the policy officers at the moment only being able to submit a request. For Eclipse, we accept requests from anyone, but we are a self-sustaining mechanism. So whoever poses a request needs to pay for it. So this is not a for free mechanism. It's really then you have to pay whatever you envision your request and output should look like.
Yeah, so this is also a discussion within IPOS. So for now, the services are meant to be offered freely, and basically the funding going through philanthropy or voluntary contributions of states. But this is also a key tenet that needs to be tested, whether this financial model is sustainable or not, or if at some point the requests will have to be payable, and then how to figure out a fair way of charging the services to richer and developing countries, etc., so that still everyone can get the knowledge they need, but we might not always be able to offer it for free, although that is the intention. Well, for free, states will still be paying into the whole system, but there might not be a price tag next to each request. So for the testing period that will be starting in September and run for the 2 years, we will secure a certain amount of funding and then run services with that funding. So there will be no charge to the requesting states. But after that, then we will see what works or doesn't. So we might have to adopt the model that Eclipse has. It's also the model that, for example, ICES, so the International Council for the Exploration of the Seas in Europe has. They do provide on request demand-driven advice, but it is not cheap. It does come with a considerable price tag. So that we'll still see how it will go. But yeah. So to Parvin, if the International Ocean Institute becomes accredited to IPOS in some way, then you can raise issues through that, and they might be taken up as a catalyst or part of the catalyst service. But it will not be possible for you as the International Ocean Institute to request the other two services, at least not as how IPOS is being set up right now.
And just to maybe add on to the idea of the price tag, as you might remember, I said, the experts work for free, the knowledge coordination body in Eclipse works for free, the method experts group in Eclipse works for free. So it's not that any of us is paid, but what needs to be paid is the EMB, the management body, because they have a 24-hour job to govern all the request needs, setting up meetings, setting up, all the emailing and so on. That is what costs. So we are not, we are non-profit. So we are not making profit with Eclipse, but it's really to maintain the self-sustainability. And I see, to get to the other point, I see the question in the chat with the platform focusing on biodiversity, whether marine litter is considered. Yes, marine litter is considered because it is one of the descriptors in the Marine Framewater Directive related to the good environmental status. And so it's, Josie, correct me if I'm wrong, it's descriptor 11? 10. So close.
Almost.
But yeah, it's considered, and just what we are doing in Eclipse with the offshore wind farm request at the moment is really also looking at the cumulative impacts of marine litter.
Yeah, and within IPOS, it would fall probably under the SDG 14. So anything related to the life in water or in the seas, in this case, would be possible to request action requests or rapid responses on.
This is really interesting to learn today about the IPOS, because at the moment with Ocean Literacy for Blue Citizenships, a program as well for ECOP, we're talking about creating this workshop on the BBNG agreement and how to translate this complex information, and all of this is also so important to even create. That could be part of, now that I'm hearing about it, also will be interesting to see how in the workshop that could be translated and create videos about it, because that's the idea of the workshop too, because the BBNG, just like there's so much that goes into this agreement, right? And it's such a, like, if you break it down, there's so many different points that go into it. But Logan said that they will be at the UNOC. Is that correct? And would it be in the green zone or in the blue pavilion? Do you know?
For the IPCL, IPLC, I don't know in which area,
Okay.
because it depends also on what Costa Rica as a state decides to do. So they are involved,
Right.
like the state level, the ministries are involved, and it's last I heard it was still a bit discussed whether they would pull it into the blue zone as something with the state support or not. So it's a bit unclear. We are also discussing with the ECOP program to have a joint green zone or green zone event on what my boss would call ocean literacy, but not meant as in like raising awareness, but ocean literacy in terms of how to work with the policy side. So there would be some ECOP networks or, I mean, ECOP networks as part of panelists or whatever, and then some of the more bigger institutions, established institutions, and to have this dialogue there. But whether that will be in the green zone or part of the IOC UNESCO's pavilion on literacy, that those are still discussions that are ongoing and should hopefully be concluded by next week. But it's yeah, I cannot give you a clear answer.
Right now the whole like pavilion thing, it's under discussion still, but
Yes.
but it's super interesting. Yeah,
and with the BBNJ, we've discussed it a bit because it's also for IPOS, it's a bit challenging. I mean, we want to be, and a lot of states have expressed interest in kind of having some support there. The problem is because the whole setup of IPOS is state requests, and BBNJ refers to the areas that are not under the state jurisdiction. So it's a bit unclear how this could work. So one of the ideas was that, I don't know if you're aware, that there are large MPAs set up in the high seas of the Atlantic, which were done between OSPAR, the Regional Sea Convention, and ICES that provided advice, and the Regional Fishery Management Organization for Northeast Atlantic. So European states, or like OSPAR states, launched the process, and then these international bodies took it over and brought it to the point where those MPAs have been designated. So one of the possible ideas is that IPOS could provide something like that, like support like ICES did in this case. But the request would have to come from a number of states, somewhere where the knowledge body or existing institutions are not filling that gap currently. So that is, but it's a bit unclear yet how this will actually work. So we do say we'll work on BBNJ, but exactly how this will work, it's a bit difficult because, I mean, if state X says we want to have a huge offshore MPA, it's not up for them to decide it. So, and it's also for us not to provide possible actions for them to take. So yeah, it's still a bit developing.
right. It's complex. It's very complex. It's the high seas at the end, right? Yeah.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. Is there's any other questions? We'll be happy to take them. Otherwise, I think I shared somewhere in the chat the emails from me, Luca, Ute, I think Josie. I didn't have it here, but you can reach out to any of us and we can then point you to anyone else if the question is better addressed to them. We might not be able to respond immediately, but we will respond. So if there is anything else that you come up with, any other questions, comments, suggestions for us to take on, please do. We'll try to provide summaries of both of these webinars within a week or two, accounting for Easter holidays for a lot of the people in the upcoming days. And then basically based on that, then liaise with the ECOP program and potentially some of the other ECOP ECR networks to try to draft this white paper to be presented at UNOC and also to be decided yet how and where to present it at UNOC, to basically be a starting point for opening these discussions further. So for IPOS, it's slightly easier now because we are still in development phase and we can take more feedback on easier and try to integrate it. BioAgora is also still developing, as Ute has explained, until the end of 2026. So there are elements that can be taken on more easily, but we also want to push this discussion further towards other established knowledge policy society interfaces that might not be on demand, but to just push a discussion on what needs to be in place for ECOPs to get more meaningfully engaged. But if there's anything else, we are here for any last questions, clarifications. Otherwise, thank you so much for sticking around, especially for people for whom this might be very early or very late. It's been really nice for us to directly talk to you rather than just get through existing surveys and try to build stuff from there. Otherwise, this is all from my side, at least.
I just wanted to thank you as well, especially for requesting feedback. It's always it's nice to see that you're trying to design these opportunities sustainably and with ECOPs in mind, and specifically requesting feedback from us. So thank you for that. And thank you for being available.
And thank you for having us.
For our audience, if you know people that might be interested, please share this information. You have all the links. I think it's a great opportunity, and the more people are aware of it, the better IPOS itself can be built. I believe if they have more feedback, and existing platforms might already have opportunities where you can get involved. So don't pass this opportunity and share as broadly if you can. And again, as always, thank you for joining. If there's nothing else, we'll see you in the next one.